What is my place within the motion picture industries? Not just as an AC or a camera operator or a creator, but how does my own personal lived experience influence my filmmaking practices? In my personal life, I have transcended my original biologically determined path through hormone applications and surgery. It may be that my gendered experience has no influence on my work, or it may be that it does. So I sought out other filmmakers who are also non-binary with the goal of hearing their views and using that to inform my conceptualization of my own career.
My name's Tori. I started just kind of messing with film in high school and didn't really know what I was doing. And then I got more serious in college and did a lot of producing as opposed to actually filming. And that side of it is definitely not my forte, which is good that it's yours. And so I've been working on roaming gender here with Scout, and it's been more structured. For my personal work, I do more like experimental, and I like to play with sound.
So my name's Fox Fisher, and I didn't expect to get into film, but I did 5 or 6 years ago after taking part in a mainstream documentary called My Transsexual Summer that I believe started a conversation with the nation at the time. I wasn't hugely happy with the edit myself, so that was the catalyst for me to pick up a camera and start making films myself about my community, people around me, events that were happening.
My name is Debot, and I've been making movies most of my life. I grew up in a household where everyone was making movies. My dad's in the industry, so I made movies all my childhood, and then they got more serious during my teen years, and now I'm studying film and making movies.
My name is Scout. I got into film in high school and sort of liked it, sort of hated it, and after a few years stopped making any films at all. And then I didn't really get back into film until I started Roaming Gender, which is the project that I'm working on now.
And I'm Al, and I just recently got into the filmmaking business along with Fox. So I haven't been in the filmmaking business very long, but I'm running My Generation with Fox now, which is an ongoing film project about trans people, basically.
I saw this one documentary, actually a friend of mine who filmed the first season of Roaming Gender. She created a documentary and she followed 3 trans men around Austin throughout their transition. So I think it took like 3 years to film or something. And that film, I was just like sitting there. I think I went by myself and I was just like, oh my God, like light bulb moment. Like I am trans. And so I think that might have influenced me like in realizing that film can actually like have a huge effect on someone's experience.
So I remember, clear as a day. I remember because we had the film crews come and visit us in our hometowns. I live in Brighton, and they were asking me about my identity, and at the time I identified as genderqueer because I think the term non-binary is a little more recent than that actually, and I don't think I had the terminology for non-binary, even though I define as non-binary now. So I was starting to talk about being genderqueer and about how I didn't feel like I was male or female, and that I was kind of, for want of a better term, I was kind of saying that I was F to M, but that didn't really work for me. And I remember they just the guy stopped filming, and the person that was getting the interview just said, "Oh, Fox, I just want to stop you there. I know this is for Channel 4, which is supposed to be a quite liberal channel and quite open and groundbreaking and stuff, but I don't think the audience is going to understand this. They're not going to get it. We probably can't use this footage. So if you could really simplify your terminology, if you could just kind of say that you're female to male, I think that would be very, very helpful for the audience and they'll be able to get that." And I was like, what? But I was so vulnerable. It was at the start of my transition. I kind of was really unsure about everything. And the only reason I was taking part in this mainstream documentary was because I realized that I was coming out into a world that didn't fully understand trans issues, and something needed to be done about that because it was just awful for people. And there was such negative press out there as well. I realized that we had to be part of the change.
I mean, this project has made me explore like a lot within myself. And has helped me open my mind to a lot of things. I think that I've been put in a lot of boxes for a lot of my life, and that's kind of all that I knew that I could be in. And so working in film in this direction has just kind of like broken all the walls of the boxes, and it just feels really great, and it's been freeing and confusing, like pretty confusing at sometimes, but mostly just healing.
We're working on an anti-bullying video at the moment that includes trans people, but also includes, you know, people of all different persuasions being bullied for all sorts of different reasons. So I think we're kind of definitely into that kind of, I know it's such a dirty word, like social justice warrior, but like, I mean, we're definitely those types of people, you know. We care about the world, and I think that when you care about one specific thing, that caring doesn't stop. You don't just go, oh well, you're outside of the box, I don't give a fuck about you, you know. It's like, you know, I care about the planet, I care about animals, and I care about human beings. So I think that the work that we do will continue to be you know, in that kind of realm. But it's always good to challenge yourself, and it's, you know, I don't want to get complacent. I don't want to be doing the same stuff over and over again, because it's just not interesting for the creator or the audience. So it's about trying to find new ways to reinvent conveying some sort of information. So we've had a lot of fun recently doing a few comedy sketches as well, like looking into like comedy sketches about what it is to be non-binary. We've got one called shit people say about non-binary people. We've got a similar one for about being trans. We tried to do these, we didn't try, but we actually made a film about awkward trans tales. So people submitted their really awkward stories about being trans, usually at the start of their transition. And then we kind of reenacted them and gave them life, just to kind of share all our experiences and be able to laugh a little bit about what happens, and you know, the crazy things that we encounter along the way.
Full-length movies are probably my favorite because they give you enough time to really explore a character and really like put them through several stages of emotional processing, and to have them respond to each other and different situations, and you can really get to know the situation more in a full-length movie.
I prefer documentaries. I prefer watching documentaries. I prefer creating them. I just think that specifically what we create is about gender and gender variant people. And I think that there's plenty of media that covers like not necessarily true stories about gender variant folks. And so interviewing people about their actual stories is essentially what I want to do and what we are doing.
After having done this for quite a few years, I don't know if I see much difference actually between creating documentaries and creating fiction. And that's because a lot of the elements of making a documentary, as natural as they might seem, you know, you have to be like, oh, could you say that again? Or could you just, you know, can we just film you walking through your door? Or, you know, stuff like that. So a lot of it is staged, and it's like a scene, you know.
In my script, I've included 2 trans characters, and I probably wouldn't have done that if I wasn't trans. So my gender affects my filmmaking in the sense that I include it, but that's the same way I include dark humor because I like dark humor, or a lot of like sexual scenes because I like that in a movie. It's just another part of me that ends up in my art.
I mean, I think that to get to the point where it doesn't need to be something that's like actively talked about anymore, I think that point is years and 20 and 50, 70 years from now. I think that society as a whole is so stuck in the binary that this needs to be a subject that just gets louder and louder. And so it's all that people fucking hear. And so they stop putting everybody in these 2 places that are so limiting.
I mean, I see myself as a filmmaker now. I think I've kind of earned the right, maybe. I don't know if you need to earn it, but I feel like I had to earn it in some ways. And yeah, so I think we'll carry on with this format. But you know, we've had conversations about, you know, like people say trans awareness is kind of where gay awareness was at 20 years ago, and I do believe that in many ways. And we're not always going to be this focused, hopefully, on trans issues. So I hope that I can do myself out of a job in some ways, that people, you know, maybe in a few years' time, the stuff that I filmed might be good documents of history as to what people were going through and what was happening for them. But I think that a lot of the films that we're making, will be completely obsolete.
So I think that for the foreseeable future, non-binary filmmakers who create work about gender are going to have plenty of work to do.
The internet makes it a lot easier, I think, because like back in the day, how would we have like gotten the means to do movies? Because we would have needed someone to bet on our projects, and that would have been like less statistically likely. But now equipment is possible to get on your own, and through the internet you can meet other non-binary people who make movies or actors or whatever. I mean, the time is now. Like, we have every possibility now because we can get the equipment, we can get the contacts, we can find each other easily, and so I think we just have to do it.
So we upload our videos to YouTube specifically because YouTube is free to the public, and I want everything that Roaming Gender is trying to get across, I want that to be available to people. The only other way we've shared Roaming Gender is at like a fundraising event that we created. And so that was specifically so that we could have some form of income for the project. And so we screened it in Austin, and we just had a bunch of people show up and like have a big cuddle puddle and watch all the episodes in a row.
Yeah, with equipment that people can just access it more easily, more and more people can create things, and you don't necessarily need the huge, big things that they have, because if you get a decent enough camera, Tangerine, they just had an iPhone, as you said. So if you get decent enough equipment, you can make really good things. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing a lot of more people doing more things on their own without these companies. And I think production companies are scared of that, actually. And that's why I think TV is becoming less and less important, because people can just put things online, they can apply for funding, and they don't really need the TV anymore, or the channels anymore.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's a real shake-up, isn't there, at the moment? And the shake-up, it's like all the cards are thrown in the air and they haven't actually all fallen on the floor yet. I think that people are still really unsure what's going to happen, what the future actually is for content and audiences.
Media has such a crazy influence on society as a whole that, like, if people were to just see more gender variant folks, more androgynous folks, like, and in like mainstream media, it wouldn't be that crazy. It wouldn't be so hard for people to wrap their head around, and they wouldn't be so afraid of not being able to call someone female or male. Like, it wouldn't make them uncomfortable. And not that that should even matter, but
yeah, it's so bizarre. I think people feel very threatened, don't they, if they can't work out someone's gender. Mm-hmm. And that just tells us how unequal this world is, because, if people weren't freaking out, then it wouldn't matter, because you'd know that men and women were treated equally. But we know often from personal experience that men and women are not treated equally, and therefore non-binary people are threatening in a number of ways too.
I think there will be non-binary representation when we make it ourselves. Like, we can't wait for established cis filmmakers to remember to include us.
I think it's happening slowly, and I think it's going to happen more and more within the coming years. But it's like the quickest way to make a big influence on society.
Make a movie about it.
Yeah, if someone could just like do that, that'd be great.
This script that I've written, this feature film script, it now contains 2 trans characters. But when I started writing it, I immediately knew I wanted these 2 characters to be trans. I wanted one of them to be a trans woman and the other one to be a non-binary, and I knew that. But initially, I wrote that out of the script because I felt like I had to. Because if I made them trans, it would be so much harder to like get the money and find the resources, and also find actors because I'm not casting cis people as trans people, and finding the right like actors and finding people willing to bet on a project with 2 of the main characters being trans and stuff like that. It felt more complicated, and so I initially wrote that out of the script, and I wrote them as cis characters, and then during the process I've changed it to what I actually wanted.
I'm liking the idea of heading into fiction where we can have a bit more fun with it. We can create characters, like trans characters, that aren't gonna be depressed or unhappy or get murdered or, you know, all that kind of stuff. They can have a decent existence, and it's not focused just on them being trans. I mean, that's what we'd like to see more of. And it's just about, you know, we're such a broad community as well. I mean, just the fact that the trans community, the only thing that connects us is the fact that we feel differently to the gender that we were assigned at birth. But it just ends there. Like, we're like all different ages, we're all different backgrounds, we've got different interests.
We can also have make non-binary people more integrated in society and generally known about by people who aren't involved in the queer community by having non-binary characters in movies.
We have really, really positive feedback. Every day we get messages from people on one of our social platforms, you know, whether it's our My Generation Facebook page or Twitter or just via email. Mm-hmm. And people tell us that they used our film to come out, or they showed it to their family, or they watched, you know, a certain film and they realized, you know, who they were. Yeah. Using our films as a resource. Often a lot of organizations will use our content as a resource as well, and that doesn't always filter back to us, so it can be a bit frustrating sometimes, because they're the ones that have the funding and then do the course or whatever, and it doesn't really ever filter back to us. So finances are a really, really tricky thing for us, because we always want to we never want to be restricted by money, and that's often the only thing holding us back from making more content.
Activism isn't usually seen as art. It's usually seen as, you know, like protests and campaigning and things like that. And that's definitely true. That is activism. But I think there is an aspect to representation in art that makes it activism, especially when things are so invisible, like non-binary people. We're so invisible in society. And so having a non-binary character in a movie becomes a form of activism by default, simply because it's showing people who we are, and it's integrating us into society. It's trying to integrate us into society, which is what I guess more normal activism is also doing, trying to advocate for our right to exist in this society. And art can do the very same thing, but in a very different way.
I mean, I think you can use art because art is also such a wide spectrum as well. I mean, you can make different pieces of art, or you can film, or you can make songs. And I think that when we think about activism, we think that, you know, it's just protesting somewhere at something, and people don't realize that activism can be so much more, because activism is essentially about raising awareness and, you know, raising awareness of a cause, of an issue, and you can do that in so many different ways. So filmmaking is only one of those different ways that you can raise awareness. Just, you know, seeing a short movie of a trans person telling their story can affect so many different people, because people can just look at it in their own time, they can look at it at their home, and, you know, it's just, it can reach so many different people in different places all around the world. So I think that art definitely is one of the strongest things that we can use in activism. I think people need to realize that you can do activism in so many different ways.
It's like a very peaceful way to protest, right? Like, you don't have to watch our videos. You don't have to participate in the project. Like, it's created as a collaborative piece so that everyone that wants to partake can.
The media plays a key part in the trans revolution and in normalizing trans people, because it has that humanizing aspect, because it shows people that we are also people. And activism on the street, it does a lot. It can change laws and things it's so necessary and so important. But it doesn't make people we meet every day on the street see us as people. It's cis people being able to relate to trans people that makes them see us as human. And that is so necessary, and that is best done with media and with movies.
I want to thank all the interviewees for their time and insights. I'm really inspired by these filmmakers and hearing their stories. I see my position in the industry kind of twofold, in a way that I create my own content, but I also work on other people's productions. And in the sense of working on other people's productions, I feel less othered, even though I'm often the only trans or non-binary person on set, because I know that there are other people like me out there in the industries doing the same thing, and it feels less isolating and like there's more of a community. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for being an inspiration. I hope you enjoyed watching this documentary.